Hello, Shaurya. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Good, good. So, how does it feel coming back home again?
Nothing crazy. I was telling you this before, but I think when I first came, we used to come back home from Petty on the weekends. That was feel pretty crazy, even though it's only 40 minutes away. I guess the lifestyle of being at home and the lifestyle of being at boarding school was drastically different. But I guess now I'm used to the constantly going back and forth and changing environments. So even though it's a whole other state, a whole other flight over here, I don't think it's anything crazy. And I guess I'm back home in the routine of things here as I was over the summer. So nothing crazy.
Before I begin with the podcast, just want to ask you a few more questions. How is Michigan? How is UMich?
It's great. I mean, it's been an amazing month for us so far. A lot of change, but surprisingly, I think a lot of people are going there, and it feels like this like magical time because it's the first time they get freedom. And I think that's the thing that when I talk to friends, they highlight as the biggest thing about being in college now, the freedom they get and how they just feel so different living on your own. But I guess I had that experience already, so when I sit in the dorms in the dining hall, it just feels the same as just eating dining hall food, except better. So it's actually an upgrade. And then going to sleeping in my dorm is like I'm used to sleeping in a dorm, and nothing crazy. I've dealt with all the things that people typically deal with already. So, but in terms of just lifestyle wise, like it's great. It's a whole new beginning and a lot of change and meeting cool new people and just pursuing new things. So I'm excited. The first month has been great, and I'm excited for what the next 4 years hold.
Well, we love to have you back again at home. I know for a short period of time, but I know that you're going to come back again in October for fall, and then we're meeting again during Thanksgiving. So before I begin, I just wanted to thank you first for coming into my podcast. My audience knows this. I have never done a podcast where I have a guest. So this is a first, and I'm glad to have my son, Shaurya, in the podcast for the first time as a guest. So welcome.
Amazing. I'm excited. Yeah.
So what we're going to do today is talk about two books, right? And I know one of the book I recommended you, which you're reading right now, Outlive. And the other book is you recommended me, and I read it. So what I want to do is talk about these two books. I'll personally tell you that both this book, the Ultra Processed People and the Outlive book, have transformed me and in a very different way, in a way where I can see health from a different lens altogether. I know that I was always very excited or enthusiastic about living a healthy life, but it's more about what you do, learning from your peers, reading books, and seeing videos, for example, or listening to podcast. But these books give me a very different perspective. It was a realization at the same time, a scary moment as well. So what I want to do in this podcast or a video is talk to you about the books, your experience, my experience, which hopefully the audience will love to hear, and see how we can take our health awareness chapter to the next level.
Incredible. Yeah, these are two amazing books, so I'm excited for what you have planned for today. Let's go through it.
Great. So let's talk about the Ultra Processed People first. Book written by Chris Van Twillecan, right? Telecan, right?
Okay, I've always been mispronounced.
Right, I know his name is little, I also mispronounce his last name quite often. But talk to me more about this book. Where did you find this book first? Who asked you to read this book?
Have I ever told you, do you know the answer to this, or have I ever told you where I found it?
I think I have an idea. I think it was Petty Library, but love to hear it from more.
It was. Okay, because I wasn't sure if I told you this, because it's a funny story. It was, I believe, January or February of this year, 2024. And I think I was reading the book that you gave to me about HBR.
I know.
What was it? 10?
The 10 best management lessons, I believe.
Yeah.
And this HBR article combined together in a book is,
I was reading that, and I was downstairs in the Petty Library. So Petty is the boarding school I went to. There's a upstairs of the library where you go, which is more social, and there's a cafe, and you just do homework and you talk to people.
Right.
And there's a downstairs section where you really go if you need to focus. So I was downstairs that day, I believe it was in between classes that day, and I just decided to come down. I don't remember if I was just getting work done or just reading or just whatever I was doing at that time of day. And I look at this shelf and I see the cover of this book. And as you can see, it would probably jump out to you immediately. There's this big triangle exclamation mark. But when I saw ultra processed, that immediately rung in my head because I've been reading. It was around the same time I was reading about ultra processed food and the dangers it causes. And I've heard about that a lot in podcasts I watched. And it was definitely a theme. That's my phone.
That's your phone. You want to take that?
Let me turn that off real quick.
Yeah, no worries.
That was the alarm I put for the end of our workout. We're supposed to keep going till now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I saw this, and I wasn't sure if it was about food or not, but I saw ultra processed, and the title is Ultra Processed People. And then I picked it up and said the science behind food that isn't food. And I've never found like a good book in the petty library. I've never like really tried, but I guess I started flipping through the pages and just going to the table of contents. It's the titles of the table of contents were pretty interesting. Like I'm sure when you're flipping through it, there's bacterial slime in my ice cream. I was talking about Cocoa Puffs. I heard about this coal butter stuff before on a podcast, so that one jumped to me like I can't believe it's not butter, that stuff. And then it went through all these different sections about breaking down what we're eating, why we can't control ourselves. Is it really that big of a deal, and like how they actually manufacture these foods? So I was like, yeah, this is the book I've been looking for. So I ordered on Amazon the same day, I believe, and it's a really new book, and nobody really knows about this book because I didn't find this on Google or anything. So it's a very like not that popular book, and I thought it's incredible, and I read it and I loved it. So that's the story of how I found it.
Right, and I loved it too, in fact. And I think if I have to sum this book in my own parlance, one thing that really hit me hard was we are putting so many things in our body, right? We eat food, and the part that hit me the most was the food that you're eating is edible, but that's not food. And that was like kind of, it stayed with me for a long period of time. When I dwelled deeper into it, reading about xanthan gum, for example, or glycerine, for example, things that they put in the food for various reasons, right? For shelf life or for making the food taste better, which you were trying to highlight from the index of the book, kind of makes you eat things which are actually not food. And I think it was really, really scary. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it was definitely shocking. I would say there were some things in the book that I read about before, heard about before, so it was more reinforcement. But I think the biggest thing in the book is that it's 300 pages, so you're really like getting all the knowledge in. You're hearing, it's different hearing a headline or hearing a line in a podcast and then reading all the science behind it. I think that's what the difference is between just hearing about the concept and actually reading it in a book. It sticks in your mind and it stays with you, which is why a lot of people will say that reading books, you read a book, you get one lesson out of it, it's a waste of time, but it reinforces it in a way that nothing else, someone telling you the answer can't tell you. So I think I was definitely shocked at the way they manufacture foods. And I think that the scariest thing is we consider it as normal because it's so easy in our society to just see what people around us are doing and not see an immediate effect. And when you don't see an immediate effect, we get brainwashed into thinking there's no effect. And I see it in my own life a lot now. I wouldn't say I saw it a lot before, but I see it a lot in Michigan just because sometimes you see people's diets and it's shocking you because as someone who's read this book, it's just clear to me that you're not supposed to eat burgers and ice cream every day. But there's people who eat burgers and ice cream every day, all meals. And that to me is like really sad because they themselves don't know. And a lot of these people who eat burgers and ice cream look really healthy. A lot of people who eat burgers and ice cream have a lot of muscle and they look pretty healthy. And I remember this quote that you told me in India, actually, driving with, what would you call my uncle?
Uncle.
Yeah, you told him that he was himself confused because he said, oh, but all the bodybuilders, they all eat this terrible food. But then if you look at the death rate of like the age that some of these people who die, who take steroids, who put this kind of shit in their body. Sorry, should I not swear?
It's okay.
Okay. Then it's really shocking to you because you can look healthy but not be healthy. Yeah. And that's something that goes in Outlive as well, which is there was a chart I remember. You remember that Venn diagram chart?
Right. I do remember
that. There's a lot of people, if there's the disease that there is, I think, insulin resistance. Obesity, if you're obese, about 80% of people who are obese have that. But there's also a large percentage of people who have that disease that are not obese. And it's really easy to fool yourself into thinking you're healthy when you're not healthy.
True.
And I think that's the thing I took away from this, looking at people around me who are eating this terrible food and they don't see the downstream effects of it. And it's scary to me because I think that it's definitely easy to go extreme and go too far with it and start overthinking every small thing. But in a general thing, like if you're just eating whole foods, it'll be fine. Just try to stick to simple whole foods. Just simplify it as much as possible. And anyone who's trying to tell you some complicated method of being healthy, there's probably something wrong in that. Always simple always wins in everything in life. So
I so agree with it. In fact, when I was reading that book, there was a classification of ultra-processed food the author has done. I think it is not done by Chris, but I believe he has borrowed from someone. I don't recall from where. I think it's a Brazilian scientist, if I'm not wrong. And they put the food in 4 categories, if you recall that, right? So category 1 is not processed food, right? Which is system, like, right? It's raw, like grains, for example, or you're having an apple, for example, falling from a tree. So that is not processed at all. And then the second grade is, when you take that and eat, mix something with it, like cooking food, for example, which is also okay, right? You take food, you mix different things, and you cook food. It's category 2. And then you have category 3, which is like going to the other extreme where you're mixing things. And category 4 is the non-edible food. And what the author is trying to say is that try to be on the lower end, try to be in category 1 and category 2. And so true per se, because one of the things that you and I started, if you recall, that now when we go to any supermarket, right, even the bread that we eat, which is so common, there are 17 to 18 ingredients. And what we have tried doing it, I followed what you said, is if it is not, it has got more than 4 ingredients, probably we should ignore eating it. And rightfully so, because the moment you go beyond 4, there are so many materials there which you don't even recognize. And if you recall, we did some experiment of searching them in Google, and we find all of these are chemical compounds. So any thoughts on that, and how do you feel about that, and are you practicing still while at Michigan?
Yeah, I think the 4 ingredient rule is something I learned from Robert Lustig, who the first time I was ever introduced to the concept of ultra processed foods, I think it was a summer going into my junior year. I believe, the summer going into my junior year.
I believe so, yes.
I was watching I think I sent this link to you as soon as I watched it. There was I think he spoke at UCLA, or one of the UCs. He gave a speech there, Robert Lustig, and that's when I first learned about sugar as a problem. And that's the first time I was introduced to the fact that sugar is a problem, and that this whole idea of obesity and stuff, I had never even thought about it before. But I started learning about that, and then I listened to a podcast where Robert Lustig was featured on Andrew Huberman in the parking lot of Nathar's guitar performance. Not guitar performance, Nathar's guitar class. I was sitting there in the parking lot dropping her, and I just listened to the podcast. I remember that. And I remember he mentioned the 4 ingredient rule. So I started practicing it, and it's not to say that there's something magically that changes when a food rises beyond 4 ingredients, but it's a good proxy that it really shows you that most foods are not good for you. I think that's the real mindset shift. It's not that 4 is a magical number. It's really that if you look at an ingredient list and you see all these random ingredients like xanthan gum and these random sweeteners, that's a sign you shouldn't be eating that food, because our bodies have not been evolved to be able to digest and process these foods. And it's easy to take a 1/1,000,000th of a macromolecule or whatever and do a test on that and show no immediate effect. It's really easy to show that, and that's what Coca-Cola and Nestle live off of. They show that there's no immediate effect of digesting that, but there is some studies have shown that there is a downstream effect of continually consuming that on a daily basis that has effects to various health outcomes. Fertility is one of them that most people don't look at, especially with microplastics. And it was a little sad to see, we were talking about how the dining hall food is not that bad for you, but I do see some things that make me a little sad, because they'll finish a tray of the chicken that's there, and you'll see them pull out a tray of another chicken wrapped in plastic, but it was being heated.
Yeah.
And then they take the plastic off, the chicken's already hot. So I know for a fact that there's microplastics in that chicken.
Right.
And that's a pretty extreme effect. They do it at Chipotle, they do it at all those restaurants. They pull out the next tray, pay attention the next time they pick out the next tray, it's wrapped in that, and it's affecting your fertility. But the chemicals in general that are driving various health outcomes like insulin resistance actually have effects for the 4 biggest horsemen, as we know from the book. That insulin resistance is something that's not talked about as much, but it actually causes things like cancer, causes things like diabetes, of course, type 2 diabetes, causes things like cardiovascular disease, causes things like even neurodegenerative disease. And many people don't have drawn that connection. Right. But yeah, I think that you want to make sure you know every ingredient on that list, and don't get fooled by marketing schemes like low fat and Diet Coke, because we saw the ingredient that the sweetener that was in Diet Coke is 300 times sweeter than sugar. So they're able to put it in lower quantities to fool you into thinking it's healthier because it's 0 calorie, but it's actually having worse effects than even normal soda. It's a rule that I try to follow, but I would say that it's not always perfect. But at least for most of my meals, I'd say that lunch and dinner is chicken and rice.
Right.
And just keeping it simple. I don't want health to seem like it's a challenging thing. It's really just about simplifying things. It's not that when people have their first layer, a lot of people who think about health think about all the healthy things you can add, that vegetables are good for you, so add that to your diet. This magical quinoa power drink is good for you, so add that to your diet. And when they think about health, they think about adding things, but it's really about eliminating. It's about taking away as many things as possible and taking away the things that are not good for your body, and just increasing the knowledge about what these things are having an effect on you, and just simplifying as much as possible.
Very interesting. In fact, I can take a good segue from your point on the FDA and how the entire Food and Drug Association industry work. So if you see most of the disease when the pharmaceutical companies are working, they are in a reactive state. For example, you have a disease and hence you need to treat the disease, and there are a lot of noble causes they are doing. They're trying to treat the disease by creating medicines which is really saving lives and all. But if you see, the whole process is very reactive in nature, and there is a regimen that FDA, which is the governing body at least in the USA, follows, wherein they make sure that a drug that they're manufacturing, they have a efficacy rate, there is no placebo effect, and it truly impacting the population that they're targeting. Food, on the other hand, is a very dramatic and a different perspective altogether. Food is not reactive. You're creating food to feed people. And at times, how do you check a food for efficacy? How do you check a food for its relevance? As you rightly said, that the impact of food is not immediate, or rather you're trying to solve a disease stem like a pharmaceutical industry. So the impact of eating something unhealthy will not come in months, it will come in years, right? And hence, even if you are targeting a small population to try it out, or giving all this chemical compound at how they are reacting to different agents or body molecules, you just cannot figure this out. And that's where I believe there's a loophole which the food industry is dramatically and to an extent, trying to meet the fiduciary duty of their investors, where they are pushing all this food out in the industry, which is causing a lot of grief to all of us. And I know that you and I love few food, like for Chipotle, you took an example. We felt to a greater extent that out of all the evil, Chipotle will be a good food. They promote a healthy food, and our sweet tooth basically was Cheesecake Factory. And I know that you and I did a search on the web by saying that, hey, where are these food made? In fact, I was arguing with you almost to a point of argument by saying, I believe the cheesecakes are made right in the shop. They have obviously ingredients will be coming from somewhere else, but they'll be like kind of baking it or making it right there. But I was so wrong. In fact, Chipotle also, all of these are made in California, and they has to travel miles in distance, and hence all of those procedures come into play. You need to put some molecules or some chemical compound to make the food fresh for a long period of time, have a longer shelf life, or you need to also make the food tastier so that it can keep asking for the same again and again. So combination of these, and if I see the FDA rule, the fiduciary duties of all this listed company or privately held company who are trying to make money, and FDA getting limited by not having a longitudinal data analysis, is causing a lot of grief. So what do you think about that? That's, again, we read in the book, we have discussed many a times. Would love to hear your views on that.
Yeah, I think one thing I mentioned before, I think I was the one who told you that Chipotle sources from one location. I think when I searched up again recently, I did find out that they did partner with some local areas throughout the country.
Is that right?
So
okay.
I might be wrong in that. I'd double check that just to make sure. But I think there are definitely restaurants that do source from one location. I think
like farm to table kind of concept.
Yeah. I think Kava and some of the other ones like Cheesecake definitely source from a single source. But I think from what I read from Chipotle, I think they partnered with some farms that have locations across the country. So, but just in general, I think the industry side of things is my biggest takeaway from the book. I think out of all the things I read, a lot of them I knew already. But one thing I didn't know was the extent to which how complicated the whole industry process is that I didn't understand before. There was a segment in Outlive, I don't remember the exact chapter, but there was a whole section that was titled describing how like the processes were with studies. And the problem was that there's no study that's longer than like 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
That exists. No. And there are very, very rare cases where there's long studies.
It's very expensive as well, right? And what is the motive? Who will do that, right? Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No. It's definitely a good point to add there because it's difficult to show long-term effects of things, and those are leveraged. And I think most people tend to have an optimist. I think people are definitely changing in a way, but I would say a large majority of the population, at least in terms of the food department, don't think there's many like evil players that play in a way. I didn't think so until last year. And I think as a culture, we're definitely shifting toward a more of a culture of distrust. I think definitely the political sphere, people have kind of entered this distrust state where they'll read the news and they'll kind of know in the back of their mind that there's some degree of this might not be true. But I think in the food industry, no one's really questioned it for so long. They've had no incentive to. Sure, America's getting unhealthy, but we just kind of attribute that to that people are being lazy in technology, and we don't attribute that to the chemicals in the food. And I think that's the misconception, that we think it's. I think Robert Lustig had this quote where we just think it's about you eat too much and you lift too little, and if we just fix that, you're fine. But it's not so simple.
Right.
And Chris highlights that very deeply in that book. It's not just about how much you lift and how much you eat. But yeah, I think the amount of money involved is crazy, and it's not that there's one person out there pushing the red button with the evil mindset. It's just that how madness of groups come together. I think we both read books by Robert Greene. He like highlights so clearly how in a group setting we just turn into like different kind of people. And I even remember, like, even you told me once in the car that it's, even if like you were showing me a scenario where if I were to get a really high paying job at a company like Coca-Cola, would I say yes? And it's so easy for me to say no, like my values come first. But then when you're getting offered that much money, you'll be like, I know it's bad, but like for now I'll do this, and hopefully one day someone, and then everyone with that same mindset of hopefully someday does something about it, and then everyone comes together. There's hundreds of people saying that, and then all of a sudden we have people like the company of Nestle sending their boats down the Amazon River, going to these poor communities and selling them cheap food, and having the retailers and the local markets going out of business, so that everyone's eating like Kit Kats and like noodles and ramen and everything, and getting sick and getting fat. And it's really sad that it's not that is one person at play. It's just the power of money, the power of companies, and it's one of the negative sides of capitalism. Like, I think capitalism is great. It's solved a lot of the world's problems. It's given us luxury. Not only people who of upper class, but even people of middle class and lower class can experience things that people from the past could have dreamed of. And I think everyone has an added element of luxury because of that. But there are negative downstream effects of that, and people are being impacted because of that. And it's just that it's scary how there's so much misinformation. I sent you that article the other day that I was reading on time. If you just read it, anyone with the sane mind will read that, and it'll just be. I don't know the words I had to read that article. Yeah. That was basically referring to this book over here and just describing it as flawed, and just taking like very headline level things. Like they didn't even talk about any of the details of the book in that article. They highlighted his self-experiment of eating ultra processed food for a month and showing all the effects he had, and then they basically took some random person and said that she ended up eating all the ultra processed food and she felt totally fine and more energetic. They didn't go into any of the science of the book. They just took the headline thing, and people don't even read.
Sad, yeah.
Most people won't even read the full article. They'll just read the headline. So it's crazy how it all comes together at play, and which is why there's so many misconceptions about it, and why people don't really know enough about the issue.
Right. Another thing that was really shocking to me reading the book was about all these studies done supporting all the UPF food and saying that how they are, if not healthy, at least they are not impacting all of the big diseases you're talking about, and how the author proved that those people who are writing about it, either they are directly or indirectly funded by all these big companies, right, like Nestle's of the world. It was very shocking. Sometimes you're in the board, you just come out of the board so that you can write the paper funded by companies like that. It's like it's completely a scam, in other words, and which is very shocking, because truly speaking, you will believe in the papers that scientists will write, but if those scientists are also influenced or they are also biased by the virtue of what is given, then as human beings, right, commoners like us, right, who do you believe, right? At the same time, how do you believe that what is authentic, right, is a big question to ask. But one more point I want to ask you on this is, a contrary to all of this belief, we also know that poverty is a big issue in the world, and we like it or not, a burger from McDonald's is cheap, right? You can actually get, believe it or not, a chicken nugget burger for under $2, right? Or you can have a $5.50 meal in the US. And although we know that whole foods are important, as I said, category 1 food is great, but procuring them, securing them is hard. And second is cooking time, right? No one has the time to cook, and and because of someone is trying to meet their ends, they'll have 2 jobs to go to. So if you look from the other lens, right, where you predominantly have people on the other spectrum who doesn't either have money or time, and this become a good segue in terms of supporting them in this ever-changing economical situation that we are in. So how do you, if I have to ask you, how do you tackle to that problem space, right? We simply cannot say that, well, UPF is great because it supports a bunch of people who will not even have food on the table if they go out of business. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Um, I will say that I don't want to like speak out of place because I know that with a lot of these political issues, there's much more nuance than what people make them out to be. And I think with political issues besides this one, people will just jump to one side or the other based on minimal knowledge. And I don't, I've read a lot about the food and I've read a lot about the food's impacts. I've read about the health, but I've not read enough about how like societal functions. I feel like I'm not well versed there to really understand because there's so much that's going on there. There's so many factors that play into it. But I don't think the answer is to say to brainwash people into thinking ultra processed food is good because that's what a lot of those articles that we were reading the article that we were reading that talked about the problem of ultra processed food being the main source of food for a lot of people in poverty. So therefore, we should say it's good. I don't think that's an effective solution because you don't want to just lie to people and just so they can feel better about themselves. And it's some people's strategy to survive, and if it's that or death, then take that option. But I guess if you look at society as a whole, I think it should be a priority more than other things, in my opinion. And it's again, there's just so many nuances in that play that at a whole like societal level, at a whole structural, at a whole government level, and how our funding works. And I've not studied economy at all to understand how government funding even works, like how much can government get involved to help fix this, and how society would respond to that. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to answer that question because I don't know if I would be able to answer it effectively.
That's
but
fair. Yeah.
I do think that if they're it should people should know that if food's bad for them, they shouldn't be lied to. And I think that's the problem today. That if we look at two groups of people who have enough money to be able to afford non-ultra processed food, they should definitely not be eating ultra processed food. But the problem is that even people who have the money are kind of addicted to it, and they would rather support the thing that's killing them because they like the taste of it, and they like to say that okay, the food's not that bad for me, and because of this study, it's not that bad for me. They'll justify eating it. I think there should be an accurate source of knowledge, and even people who it's life or death, okay, like eat it. I'm not telling you that just for your health, sacrifice everything else. That people go through hardship, and I understand that. And it's not the end of the world if you have to do that. And sure, there might be health implications down the road, but you shouldn't be lied to about that. You should know that going in, is my opinion.
I think if I summarize, awareness is very important, and then government involvement. I think I also believe on a lighter note, even government is not aware, or maybe they're putting a blind eye to it for various reasons, including money and capitalism that you spoke about. So I think that awareness is very critical. And then how do you involve yourself to make sure that you do not drag people to a situation where there are bigger issues, right? If you truly see, and again, I do not have all the data to prove it, but if you have a population who can only survive in, let's say, ultra processed food, burgers, chips, and things like that, but down the road you're creating problem for yourself. All these people will land up in hospitals and emergency care, and they anyways do not have money. So the government is funding the money. So it's like you're pushing a problem from today to tomorrow, and that problem even will be humongously large. It will be a larger problem to solve. So I also kind of believe in you that awareness, and that's something to do right now so that we can have a preventative care right now, like an early intervention, so that we can avoid all those cases which comes later anyways, which government do not have money to pay. I have one more point to mention about in the ultra processed food or people book before we move on to the Outlive book, which was about chewing. And I don't know if you recall that chapter where author was mentioning about that how the ultra processed food is very they're very, very soft to eat, and because of that, what is happening, our chewing habits are going away, right? So they are, look at, for example, right, juice, right? You don't have to eat food or fruit, sorry. In the morning you are in a rush, drink orange juice. So you don't have to drink apple, you can drink apple juice. So you're moving the food from really chewable food to in a liquid food. And that is true. Even burgers are soft, chickens are soft these days. You have patties where you can take the meat, the bone out of the meat. And because of that, the entire food industry is believing in softer food. And as a result of that, we are not chewing enough. And there research done, which the author mentions about that. You don't have to go back far in the history. Even 300 years back, the jaws of our individual are bigger than the jaws we have now, which is causing so many problems, which are mouth, breathing problems with your teeth, for example, problem with how you are having different kind of nasal and other sensation problem. And interestingly enough, while there are other impacts on body, I was very curious to learn about how chewing itself can impact so much in a body. In fact, I read one more book, Breath, which again has a deeper chapter in meaning to chewing, which obviously when you read the book we can talk more about it. But that was really surprising to me. I don't know if you have anything closing from your side on the ultra processed people book before you move on to Outlive.
Yeah, that was definitely shocking to me too. But it's also something I've heard that we're. I think that if you're eating burgers every meal, so soft, ice cream, and repeating that, you shouldn't be eating soft food. It's common sense. You should be eating normal food. And I think we look at the nutrients of the food. We look at the chewability of the food. But I'm sure there's 100 different things that are in play here related to food that have effects on our body that we haven't even looked into yet. And to me, the answer is that there's so much that's at play that's affecting us. And if you just look at people around you in the modern world, you can see those effects in how they live and how they look. And the simplest answer to that, you can read all the books and everything, but it really just comes down to the simplest, just to simplify as much as possible. Because I think I've read a lot of these books and try to go too extreme and think that I need to take control of everything now because everything's impacting me in some way. Whether it's the Febreze spray or the plastics and touching plastic. There's so many things that can affect you. But I think it comes down to the 80-20 rule where out of all the things we read about, 80% of them 20% of the things will give you 80% of the impact. So we're starting with a lot of people listening to this, if you're not consistently exercising, that's a great place to start. And then just eating whole foods is the simplest way to think about it. Because I think there's so much misconception in nutrition. If you just eat simple food, just like meat and rice, they're just that, plus vegetables and all the things are good for you. But just keeping your main food to whole foods. Nothing with more than 4 ingredients, is simple food, and whether it's the nutritional effects or the chewing effects that affect the shape of your jaw, to all the little things. I think starting with the basics and having the strong foundation, and without stressing too much about it, adding the little things that help. I just think that if you eat those whole foods and if you just live a simple lifestyle, the way your body was designed to live, then all those little effects that are happening, whether it's the changing shape of your jaw or all the dental problems that we have today, or just random things that happen around our body that we can't explain, it just all comes down to those simple interventions.
Wonderful. I think good time to go to the next book, Outlive. I know that you're reading through it now. It's one of the most fascinating book I read earlier part of this year. I think this was the first book I read in this year, I think back in Jan. And Peter Attia, who is the author, who rather was a practicing MD before, now he has gone full-time into a different discipline of medicine altogether. He starts the book really well about medicine 1.0, back in the day during the Roman time, and the current time, which he calls as medicine 2.0, and the fallacies around it. So I still recall the fallacies, and I'll reiterate and would love to hear your views. And very nicely and aptly put. If you see today, for every disease state, there are measurements that we do, right? So there are annual checks. If you have certain symptoms showing up, you can show up to your doctor and you just do certain checks, and which will tell you about what's going on with your body. And once you are in a particular zone, which is like you have the disease, medicine 2.0 is all reactive. So they will only treat you once you show the symptom of the disease. I know you mentioned type 2 diabetes. Let's take that as an example. Type 2 diabetes is measured, by taking fasting blood sugar test, or you can take both, fasting or without fasting. But end of the day, you're trying to measure your, if I'm knowing it, HbA1c, that's what you're trying to measure. And if it is higher than a particular number, you're diabetic. If it is in a borderline, you're pre-diabetic, and then rest all is you're not diabetic. Now, assume this, if you're, you are right at the, if you're not even a borderline, you're about 10 points away, let's say, for example, or a few points away. Medicine 2.0 will not give you medicine. It'll say that you're not you're not diabetic, so you don't get it. So that's one fallacy, because you're just waiting for a patient to come into a disease state, and then you're trying to manage it. right? That's number one. Number two that I also learned is that, four horsemen disease, which you also mentioned, right? Which are, if I remember them right, cardiovascular disease, metabolic disease, the neurodegenerative disease, and cancer, which unfortunately is the 90% of the pain that the world feels, and people are dying because of that. They are related to each other, right? But in a medicine 2.0, it's not done that way, right? You are diabetic, they will give you a diabetes medicine. Everyone knows that if you are higher in diabetes number, you can have hypertension, you can have other issues, but sure not, unless you don't show those symptoms, you don't get the medicine, which is second fallacy that you have. So that was a big learning for me, and I think medicine 3.0, according to him, is which is preventative, which is predominantly you don't wait for a disease to happen, rather you prevent the disease to happen from, and hence he's not against medicine. He's saying that take it way before time, than taking it later on and then become a victim of the disease and stay with that disease so long. I know that you're also reading through it. Was it shocking to you in terms of how medicine 2.0 works, or any points that you would like to mention?
Yeah, I definitely think I didn't know enough about these diseases before I read the book. So it's definitely cool to read about how these diseases work, but mainly how medicine 2.0 approaches those diseases. I don't think I think doctors are great people at heart, and I think most people, like 99% of people, are good at heart. So I don't think anyone has the incentive to just keep delaying it for the sake of money. Like they just think, oh my god, it's too much work to come in now. But doctors are good at heart. They're mainly driven by some kind of purpose, and a lot of them, the purpose is to help people, and they all want to help people. It's just that we're looking at the culture. Culture. I feel like culture is it acts like in a different system than humans, right? I think when you bring humans together, it's a whole different art, which I think is fascinating. But I think you just have to accept that the way that the culture has formed over the last few years, really at an industry level, that trickles down as an effect to how we interact with doctors. I think you just need to accept the fact that I think it's been culture in the past to kind of just treat them like gods, and whatever they say, like just follow that.
True.
But we look at their 10 years of experience, and it's very difficult what they go through and the study they go through, and they're very knowledgeable and have a lot of expertise, but we listen to everything they say, and we think that whatever they say we must do, and we're fine. But I think you need to accept the fact that they're good to be able to use that expertise to diagnose you with certain diseases. They're good to help you with prevention for some of these diseases. But I think what we're realizing now is that there is still a lot of money involved in the industry as a whole. So unfortunately, it is technically it's more work for people to come forth and just make the brute force try to prevent it at all costs. If you have very, very low chances of showing any sign of cancer, they'll push it off and won't put the effort in screening, right? I think one thing that Peter Tia is his biggest value is heavy screening and everything early on, just trying to make sure, do you have it, because early detection is key to remove these diseases, especially with things like cancer. Number one predictor of will you survive this cancer is how early do we find it. So for him, it's all about, we want to prevent this. All his patients, we're screening, and medicine 2.0 just doesn't do that. It will wait till you see the symptom. It will wait till you see something that indicates that, okay, maybe now is a good time. And they'll do sometimes screening before symptoms, but usually at the age 40, 50, instead of even 20s, 30s. Because
Cool.
Another big lesson of the book is that these diseases build with time. There's another book I read called The Slide Edge, and all these diseases follow the slide edge, which is the exponential effect, the snowball effect, where it doesn't happen, you don't eat a burger and you get cardiovascular disease, but you eat a burger every day and then you get it 10, 20 years down the line. And it starts now. It starts at the age of 20, 30. That's when it starts. And it starts from your lifestyle choice from even when you're 10, 11 years old, because you build habits early on. And if you build a habit of eating burgers every day, 10, 11 years old, you're probably going to still be doing that at 30. And that's when it's building up, and that's the snowball effect that's happening. And medicine 2.0 doesn't step in to tell you that you shouldn't be eating burgers at 11 because you don't show any symptoms yet. There's a chance you don't get the cardiovascular disease. So what incentive do they have to invest time and resources there when, oh, wait, there's a 60-year-old right now who has cancer in stage 4 or whatever. I don't remember the exact how cancer works, but let's go prioritize that and wait for them to show symptoms before we prioritize that. But again, you're just creating more problems without identifying at the beginning. And I think that people like Peter Tia do a great job of helping us shift from medicine 2.0 to 3.0 to as a mindset shift as a society and for doctors as well. So there are more and more doctors who read his work and follow his work, and people are driven by the passion and purpose to help people realize that there's this structural flaw and that they try to update the way they do things to align with more of the vision of medicine 3.0. But I think people need to realize that not everyone has reached that stage yet of understanding and awareness, so it is up to you. You can't put your faith in a doctor, as many people do. It's people that even we know do, that they'll say whatever the doctor says I do, because the doctor is God and we just follow whatever they say. Instead, you need to take awareness for yourself, and you can't just put your trust in someone else. You need a little bit of self-reliance, and you need to tell yourself that you need to make yourself more knowledgeable into how diseases work, how your lifestyle choices are affecting that, because most doctors are not going to tell you to start exercising and start eating. And even if they do, they'll tell you to do the bare minimum, when really you should be doing it more consistently. Make it a part of your lifestyle, because it's just fun and you feel great. So I think that's just a shift, that we need to take more action to our own hands while we're still going through this transition.
Well said. And again, I want to come back to the point you said, doctors are not evil. And I completely agree to that point. I think the reason they do the way they do it is because there's a way they've been taught. As you said, they'll put their 10, 12, 15 years into learning things in a particular way. And that way is ingrained in their mind and their body. And that's the only way they know how to treat a person. And also it's about the milieu they live in. Because if they detract from that particular, the area that they are operating in, they'll be challenged and questioned by the community, which is very confirmative community, right? Because they believe in certain way and mean they do things, and hence how things are done. And I completely agree that with the with the amount of information available today, now Gen AI is coming in. Also, it's dangerous at certain point in time, but awareness to a degree of making sure you're aware of things without having the hallucination is a big thing. The point I want to highlight more is that, as Peter Attia went ahead with the book, I believe there are 4 areas he mentioned which are very critical. And one area we already spoken is about what you're putting inside your body, both food and what you're drinking. In fact, he goes to a point by saying that if you can, stop drinking all kind of liquor, right? Be it wine, all of that is not good for you, right? So that is number 1. Number 2, he spoke about exercise. And again, to your point, he talks about category 2 exercise, which is very important as you grow old, in terms of making sure that you can, carry on to activity. And I think the underlying theme of the book is longevity, as we have read both. It's all about living a long life, but a healthy one. That's what he's trying to talk about. So what you eat is important, what you drink is important, how you exercise is important. Third thing he spoke about is sleep. I know that you have read many books on sleep, and before even I read this book, he told me about how and why sleep is important. Would love to hear more from you on that. But third part is sleep is so very important. In fact, the reason we see a lot of Alzheimer's disease today, dementia today, cannot be proven to the point and degree, but by and large, even the medical community is believing that sleep has a big role to play in that, right? So that's sleep is the third part. And fourth is how, I think you already highlighted, how do you test early? And not only early, what do you test is also very important. For example, I've been doing a well check for as long as I'm in the US, right? And I never done a bone density test for myself. I never knew what is VO2 max until about 2 years back. I knew what VO2 max before this book, but which, by the way, it goes in detail about volume of oxygen during stretch is so very important for your longevity. I didn't know this all things, right? So those are the 4 elements which I learned, like eating, drinking, what you're putting in your body, how you're exercising and what you're doing with exercise. He has given certain routine as like backpack to hiking kind of a thing, which I don't know if you've read that part yet, but and the third part is all about making sure that you can sleep well and sleep restfully. And fourth is the test that you need to do early, as well as the right test as well, so that you know that where your health stats are and how you can improve it accordingly. Any thoughts on that? I mean, those are my 4 learnings from the book that I'm taking it very dearly in personally. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've not gotten to that part of the book yet, but I already know about a lot of these things. Because I think the way he structures the book, he starts with the whole like scientific breakdown of Where's the table of contents?
If you go further down, I believe, few more pages.
After the introduction?
Yeah, no, it should be before introduction, I believe. One more page.
Yeah,
there you go.
so he starts with this after the introduction, like first 50 pages. He goes into like the full science breakdown
of each of the diseases,
yeah,
right? Or the horseman diseases, yeah.
That was really interesting, but also very sciencey. So it was a little bit of a hike to get through. But I'm just finished that segment as we're speaking right now. So part 3 is all about all the interventions in your own life. But I'll be happy to talk about them in general because I've already started doing these things, a lot of them, before reading the book.
Right,
but
right. Talk about the sleep. I know that you have read a lot about sleep.
Yeah, I read Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. Yeah, I think sleep is great, but I'm kind of in the middle ground right now where I'm kind of confused about because I've lived all the lifestyles. I've lived the lifestyle of not getting much sleep. I've lived the lifestyle of sleeping at 3 a.m. and waking up at like 1 p.m. I've lived that lifestyle. I've lived the lifestyle of sleeping at 9 every day and waking up at 5 every day for like 3-4 months. I live the lifestyle of a normal person right now of like sleeping at 12 and waking up at 8. So I'd say I lived all of them. And I'd definitely say placebo is a big, in terms of your day-to-day how you feel, placebo is a big thing. It's really the story you tell yourself. But at the end of the day, you're going to feel better if you're sleeping on time, waking up on time, than if you're like sleeping at 3 a.m. That's I don't think any placebo, you'll just, even if a placebo was playing an effect, like that is still, you won't feel good on a day-to-day level. And I think as I'm saying this now, I'm getting more thoughts in my head. So I think we could break this down into 2 categories. When you were talking about sleep, you were mainly talking about the long-term effects of sleep. So the Alzheimer's disease and dementia and all these things, which I think there's very little placebo in that if you're getting good sleep, that you'll have a lower risk probability of that. But I think when my story with sleep is that whenever I started prioritizing sleep, it always was a priority because I cared about how I felt on the day-to-day. It was more of an immediate thing. And I will say that the days I was sleeping at 9 and waking up at 5 were like really happy days. Like I felt great. I think I've learned all the tricks and tips of like how to master your sleep and like how to get amazing.
Like wearing glasses during nighttime.
Yeah, I've done all of it. I've done all the little nuances and they do work. But I think right now I'm in the middle ground where it did get unhealthy at one point where if I miss it one day, then my whole day is ruined. And there's definitely placebo that plays into that. But I still do think now that I am sleeping at like 12 and wake up at 8 or 9. I think on a day-to-day level, I would feel better if I was sleeping earlier. I do think that part is true. But I think the extent to which I was in it before the other extreme was that I have to sleep at the same time every day, which I will say that out of all the things I've tried for improving sleep, sleeping at the same time, waking up at the same time every day is by far the best thing you can do. And there's a lot of things you can do, like controlling the lightness and the temperature of your sleep environment. And like the meal times is a big one for me. If I eat too late, I struggle to sleep. And taking warm showers, taking cold showers to regulate temperature. But there's hundreds of things you can do. I think that sleeping on time at the same time every day and waking up at the same time every day was the biggest thing because you just regulate yourself.
How many hours are you getting these days?
I'm always get 8 to 9. And there hasn't been
I think that is most important. I if I may, I think yes, if you can be disciplined about when you go to bed, waking, which I try by the way, but you and I both know that it is not practically possible, at least for me, right, with my travel and everything. But if I can at least aim to get my 7 to 8 hours of sleep, which is what I'm targeting, I think you're targeting 8 to 9, I think that makes a huge difference for me, right? So I know a lot of people go to bed and not able to sleep. So you may be on the bed for 8 hours or 9 hours, but truly what you're getting sleep maybe 4 or 5 hours because of waking up time and again. That's also causing a lot of problems. So if I understand you right, you're saying that you're more flexible now, yet you're getting your amount of sleep that you need. You can still go to bed at 12, but you're waking up at 8 or 9, so you're getting your 8 hours of sleep. Or you can go at 10, waking up at 6 or 7 and getting 8 hours of sleep. Is that what you're trying to say? I just want to make
definitely.
Sure. Yeah,
and quantity is definitely an important factor to look at. But I do say that one thought I do have is that quantity is not everything.
Okay.
That you will feel different if you sleep at 10 to 7 versus 2 to 10.
I understand.
Because I do agree with the flexibility point, though, that it's okay to be flexible and to not sleep at the same time every day, but you do feel, based on the time you sleep and the time you wake up, you do feel different because you're more aligned to your circadian rhythm, just simply that put.
I agree
so
with that.
I do think that sleeping earlier is better, at least if you know your circadian rhythm well, and I don't think you'll feel great throughout the day if you sleep late. So that is definitely important, but I will say that a lot of people feel a sense of pride in the fact that they sleep little. And I was talking to my friend, the podcast I'll be releasing this Sunday. Don't know which tomorrow. I don't know when you'll be uploading this, but it's probably going to be out by the time this is out. My friend, like, for months straight, he slept at 12:15 and woke up at 5:15.
12:15 in the night?
Yeah, he slept at 12:15 a.m. and woke up at 5:15.
So that's like hardly any sleep.
Like, he went through a phase of superhuman discipline, trying to be the best at everything, trying to leverage every hour of the day, every minute of the day, every second of the day toward getting better. And I think a lot of people go through that phase when they find that flame within them that they want to ignite. And I think people feel pride in not getting enough sleep. People feel pride in feeling that they can live off a little sleep. I've come to a realization now that getting sleep is like really good for you, and you should prioritize it. And it's one of those things that is important for you that we just, for some reason, look down upon in society. I don't know what that reason. I guess because we value efficiency and more than anything in today's society. But definitely that.
Got it. Yeah, and I think for Peter Attia, all of the exercises is subscribing to their videos available. So there's a website where you can go, and I'm sure you can search up in YouTube, where he actually shows how to do category 2 exercise. These are not this is not for body building kind of exercise. This is for longevity. Just want to make sure the audience is clear on that, which is more about how do you make sure you're flexible? How do you make sure that you're not hurting yourself and you can be functional when you're old? Believe it or not, as you grow old, simple things like brushing your teeth becomes a big issue. Simple things like shaving, becomes a huge effort, right? And you do not want a longer life where you cannot be self-sufficient. And that's what the book is all about. That yes, you want to live longer, but a healthy life. And for that requires a lot of discipline in terms of what you're eating, how you're exercising, discipline towards sleep, which we just now spoke about, and also measurement. So I definitely want to talk about the VO2 max, which I've been very, very passionate about. So VO2 max, as you know, is a volume of oxygen. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shaurya, but it's a volume of oxygen in your blood when you're in a stretch, like exercising, running, for example, and all. And that kind of tells you that how your body is enduring to different situation. And there are different VO2 max for men and women, and they are by age brackets. I believe you start measuring from 20 and above, 20 years older and above. It's a 10-year bracket you have, and it gives you a number that you need to attain to. For example, if you're in the age group 30 to 40, your VO2 max should be at the highest degree, should be about 45 or so. If I'm getting it at 48, I believe between 45 and 48. And what the author says, what Peter Attia is saying is that, look, you should not aim for VO2 max for your age category, because as you grow old, you want to be more functional. Like, for example, we both love hiking, right? It'll be a shame if hiking goes out of my life when I'm in 70, right? Just because yes, there's a longevity, but I cannot hike anymore because my knee hurts or my back hurts or I cannot walk. So only way to do that is I have to maximize the VO2 level, not for the age group I am in, but for the age group before me, right? As far back as you can go, so that you're always fit and you can be burning oxygen at a higher volume at a stretch level much more better than the other people. And I'll tell you, consciously for the last 2 years, I've been tracking my VO2 max. Something I'm not completely proud of, but I'm getting there. I would say I'm an above average category. I'm not even high at this point in time for my age group. But I'm targeting this year to be in the high category for my age group before I go to what Peter Attia is saying, go to the other age group. But I have to first meet my age group. But regardless, what I'm trying to say is that as I'm working towards my VO2 max, I personally feel, I don't know if there's a placebo effect or not, but I personally feel that truly it has helped me to, endure more, do more, and feel better. I know you are very young. You are not even 20 years old. So your VO2 max, you can't even measure now, I believe, scientifically. Because, they say after 20 years, they say, I don't know why though, but I think, but pretty certain that when you're climbing that mountain or, going, I'm sure we're planning for this other trek. What's the name? Alum?
Alum Cave Trail to Mount LeConte in Great Smoky Mountains.
Awesome. So that's a 12-mile, I believe, hike 11. Or 11-mile hike. and which is like strenuous hike
Yeah,
up there, right?
3,000 feet elevation, yeah.
Yeah, 3,000 or
3,000 feet.
3,000 feet elevation, right? So for doing something like that, you need to have a great VO2 max, unless you want to do it in your own pace, right? So if you truly want to do it in a 4-5 hours of going up and coming down, into a great VO2 max. So I believe those are important element. DEXA test, which I learned, is about bone density. Typically when you go for a regular health checkup, no one is going to do that. It's very important. I know you're young, but any thoughts you have on early test and knowing your vitals well so that you can work towards it?
I've never done it much. I've never thought about VO2 max at all, really. I would say definitely my training now is mostly focused toward bodybuilding, because that's like the phase I'm in right now. That's what brings me the most meaning, and that'll probably be at least a part of my life for the next few years. So most of it, when I think about exercise and training and nutrition, I'm mainly focusing on that. So I'll sacrifice other elements in the time being in approaching that. And then later on, like other times when I'm not bodybuilding, I guess my training's focused on either wrestling or powerlifting, whatever like pursuit I'm in, that for the sake of it. Which it's not going to be like that for the rest of my life. And I think that at some point when I'm older, when I'm not wrestling anymore and not able to powerlift anymore, and I'm happy with the physique I built, then I think my training will shift more toward general intensity training, and that's when I'll probably integrate things. I think there's different pillars of training. I think something similar to what Andrew Huberman does now, because he only does weight training, I think 2-3 times a week, but he does exercise every single day, just different kinds, right? One day he'll be focused on his zone T cardio, one day he'll be focused on his VO2 max. So on VO2 max day he'll be sprinting, on zone 2 cardio day he'll just be doing like miles and miles of running. And for me, like I kind of know the things in my mind that I enjoy doing. So whether that be like the lifting 3 times a week, for my like zone 2 cardio, I might start doing biking or hiking, because I don't like running.
I know.
Or for my VO2 max, like a lot of people do sprints or like just sprints on the bike.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll be wrestling at the time when I'm older, but just integrating parts of that in my life, it'll probably be more of a purpose later. I guess it's not a purpose enough now, but I will say I probably still end up doing that kind of training, whether it's through hiking or like wrestling. I still end up probably doing enough for that, because I can imagine times in wrestling practice where I've felt like I've pushed like a really hard like sprint or something, that I felt like I've reached some kind of VO2 max state. So I'm definitely training it, even if it's not like regimented in any way. So, but there's one point you mentioned throughout this the question you asked that was important to me, because you mentioned that when you're older, like little things get hard, whether that's brushing your teeth or just getting out of bed when your back hurts, and there's little things that we kind of
take for granted.
Right now, at the age of 18 years old, it's too far away. So we ignore it. And then a lot of people will think that the next 4 years of your life are the best 4 years of their life. And then they'll forget that from 20 to 100 is 80 years. And that's a lot of time.
True.
And I think it's hard to grasp big numbers. I think people struggle to understand the universe and black holes and galaxies because it's just too big. It's just too big, and our mind is not good at grasping big things. And because of that, we kind of just, when we think about life, we think about childhood, teenagehood, college life, and then adult life. Except when we look at the length of each time, childhood, then you have teenagehood, college life, and then the rest of your life, which is like 4 times the size. Yeah, we just categorize it as one box. Yeah. Then we forget that the decisions we make now in the next 4 years will affect the next 80 years. And that's a lot of time, and we just think that we'll be okay with. I think a lot of people around me, and maybe me at times, have the mindset that it's okay to kind of like have some fun right now and to just make bad decisions now, because we'll figure out a way to make it work. It's too far away. When we face a problem, if we do face a problem, if we get fat or if we start having health problems, we'll deal with it then. But then we forget that when we actually start dealing with it, then we don't want to deal with it anymore. And when it creeps up on you, and you'll realize that it was not something that just crept on you today, it's something that crept on you over 20 years, then it's too late to deal with it. And that's a long period of time. And I feel like if you're happy with yourself for 80 years of health when you're 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, and the decisions you made throughout your entire childhood are leading to your good health now, you'll live a happier life overall, because the time leading up to it, you'll know you're doing it for the future, and that'll fill you with dopamine. And when you're actually experiencing the results of that, you'll look back at your past self with that happiness, besides the lots of stimulation now for a short period of time, a burst of that, and then just misery for the rest of your life, which I think most people live by. So I think that's why any of this is important, and that's why even if you're not old yet and these cancer hasn't hit you yet or cardiovascular disease hasn't hit you yet, you're not fat yet. It still starts now, and I think that's what's really important about anything that we talk about today. So
It's a great way to end the podcast here. Thank you for coming on the video and the podcast with me. But before we end, I want you to let my audience know about your podcast. I'm going to leave the URL of your podcast in my comment. But why don't you give a quick glimpse of what you do in your podcast?
yeah, my podcast. I do it because I love conversations, and I think there's an art to conversation that I find fascinating. And if you look at everyone, and you really look at your interest as a person, there's something that you are just mesmerized about the world. And for some reason, there's something about conversations that's fascinating to me. So my goal with every podcast that I film is that some way start with nothing and make something. That's what I enjoy the most. Just sit with someone and see what I can find in the other person, how we can start somewhere and go somewhere and find connections within ourselves. And when I finish a podcast, I define it as successful if we both felt some kind of emotional connection, and hopefully the audience can feel that through the podcast. So if you're into a variety of topics similar to health, but all about living a better life, emotions and deep conversations filled with fun moments and laughter moments, it's a podcast where I sit down with as many people as I can once a week and just talk about life for about an hour or two. So if you want to check that out and you're interested in that, check the description, and new episodes every Sunday.
And the name of the podcast is?
Barua Podcast. BARUAH on YouTube and Spotify. Barua Podcast.
Thank you so much, Shaurya, for coming in. And I look forward to having similar conversation in the future as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.